There we go. Wow. You know, I was here moderating the film before this. It was a film about Melvin Van Peebles and how he got Sweet Sweet Badass made and against all odds. And then you watch this. We talk about the idea of Black excellence a lot. It's a hashtag now that kind of gets thrown around. But when you watch films like this, you really understand what Black folk have had to do and go through and persevere and still excel. It's an amazing thing. It's an amazing thing. I think we all deserve a round of applause for existing in a space where, against all odds, we still excel. Black excellence is a real thing and has been since the start of this country. So I just thoroughly enjoyed this film. I would now like to bring up to the stage Bijan Bayne. You saw him in the film as one of the interviewees. He's a Jakie Robinson historian. He will be conducting the conversation with Andre Gaines, the director.
Thank you. I hope everybody found the film informative and entertaining, of course, and thank Andre for a brilliant job in terms of putting it together. It's very emotional to watch it for the first time with other people, of course, so I have to kind of wait till the lump subsides in my throat for the way that the material was put together in such an impactful and insightful, emotional manner, but in a good way. And obviously, we want to thank Floyd and Stephanie, and congratulations to them for the 20th anniversary of this fest, which has grown and given people the opportunity to expand the dialogue in this country and giving creators a chance to contribute to that by adding narratives to the discussion and the way that we frame not only issues in this country, but the issues in the feature films, the independent films, the shorts that Floyd and Stephanie have brought to this wonderful, still expanding, still growing fest. They're great people, they're great parents, and they've really given people opportunity again to sort of celebrate things, examine aspects of society and relationships, fun topics, topics with more gravity, and it's a great platform that they provided here over the last couple of decades before people even used the word platform widely. So we want to sort of unpack the legacy of Curt and Bill and Jackie and Bob through discussion with Andre about putting together this piece, the thought process behind it, what led to it, and maybe even, if there's time, open the floor for some of the questions that you may have. Thanks. So, Mr. Gaines, in the mid to late 50s, when Jackie was preparing to exit the game and still have his more enduring role on society as one who pushed social change and became very active in the movement. Even people like Rosa Parks said that, you know, what he did inspired her that day. One thing that I've kind of wondered over the last couple of days is, why do you think on the team that Jackie played on, with Campanella and Newcomb and guys like that, Junior Gilliam, and later even in the 60s, Tommy Davis and Willie Davis, which was arguably the most prominent team that had great Black talent other than St. Louis, do you think there's a reason why the Cardinals walked in Jackie's footsteps more in terms of social impact and being vocal in the movement, whereas these guys like Newcomb and Campanella actually played with Jackie for a while and were contemporaries, but you don't think of the Dodgers, the team where he would have been around those guys and been like the leader in the clubhouse, as a team where in the 50s and 60s you had a lot of guys that were vocal about what was going on in the society. You think there's a reason?
I mean, I think a lot of it's, circumstantial. When we think of the civil rights movement now, it's compressed, it's neatly packaged into books, into films. But during that time, anytime you ever talk to someone who was alive, who was marching, who was organizing during that period of time, it was sort of taking any of the wins that you could when you could, not in any kind of particular order, and it wasn't in an exact organized fashion. And so I think that having Bill White, Bob Gibson, Curt Flood, having these guys, again, come together on the Cardinals team in the early 60s, Jakie Robinson was everybody's first idol, but you had a confluence of these three guys, particularly that came together on the Cardinals team that was representative of a Negro League's style of play, their speed, their aggressiveness, all of these types of things were representative of a time that predated Jakie Robinson breaking the color barrier, and they idolized Jack. And so I think it was more circumstantial than it was deliberate. And it just so happened that because of their special connection with each other, that it made sense to really focus on them in this film. I mean, we have so many great ball players that came after Jakie Robinson. We had the great, Hank Aaron, who had an interview of before he passed away, and Frank Robinson, and so many guys Willie Mays that came after Jakie Robinson that idolized him, but there was a special, unique circumstance with these guys on that team that was, it's like kind of a racially harmonious bubble, if you will, during that period of time. So I think that's how it came about.
It's interesting to sort of look at in hindsight and in retrospect. Another thing that might have contributed to it was what you illuminated in the film was the fact that they came together to fight the spring training Jim Crow. So that may have made those guys also a little bit more, because they broke that barrier, which Robinson obviously broke the barrier that he broke, but they broke the barrier down in St. Petersburg, and then they coalesced around that issue with White in the leadership role, whereas that didn't happen with Brooklyn and LA.
Yeah, no, that's true. Most ball players, I mean, most people don't realize, especially during that period of time, and even now, they don't have this was the first time in our nation's history we were seeing the combined activist athlete, right? So we sort of take that for granted now in the form of one of our executive producers, LeBron James, in the form of Colin Kapernick, so forth and so on. But back then, Jakie Robinson was a player first, and then he became an activist. But with Bill White, Bob Gibson, Curt Flood, this is the first time we're seeing that actually come together as these guys are playing at the highest level possible on the field, but then off of the field still fighting for freedom and liberation. And that was unique. And this was all happening in the 60s. Probably the most prominent one is Muhammad Ali during the 60s, who was the athlete activist. We had Bill, Russell, who just passed away. You had Kareem Abdul-Jabbar. You had Jim Brown. You had so many of these athletes during this period of time who were using their platform. And it's interesting to hear that word platform, because we just think like Instagram and whatnot. But, we see Curt Flood talking about, hey, I'm just starting my career in baseball, but I'm also just starting my career in NAACP, and I'm going to use this platform to speak out against racial injustice and do it in a way that I'm able to do because I'm able to use my celebrity to push it forward. And that gave us birth to our modern athlete activists that we see now.
Thanks. The period that you covered is it's you know, so relevant and so interesting that, you know, all those things were going on in the general society while baseball was going through what it was going through as sort of a microcosm of society. What do you think about, having worked on this project and other projects, you know, you obviously produced about Dick Gregory. What do you think about...
Which we just got an Emmy nomination for, by the way.
Big ups for that. And speaking of big ups, shout out to Rachel Robinson on her 100 years on the planet.
Yeah, thank you. We also screened the film at the Jakie Robinson Museum opening this year in New York, which was only about 3 weeks ago. And Rachel Robinson was there, and she had just turned 100, only a couple of days prior to that, and was there at the opening. I mean, that's extraordinary for her to be there at the opening of this museum that they had been working on for at least 20 years to finally, you know, come to fruition. It was a magical moment.
So, for everyone, you know, for you, for me, for everyone here and online and what have you, did you give much consideration during or even after the fact to the fact that some of the guys who were from the Deep South, like Henry Aaron and Willie Mays, were not more visible during the Civil Rights Movement, and why do you think those things were in their cases?
Well, yeah, we did give a lot of consideration to that, and that's why we mentioned it in the film, that they really didn't have the same sort of platform, at least at that time, and they were also, in many cases, the lone guy on their teams, whereas with the Cardinals, you had a larger group. And I think that, you know, even in the case with Bob Gibson not standing right behind Curt Flood when he was fighting against the reserve clause. And Bob Gibson is great. That's my he's my favorite character in the whole story of him beaming people in the head with balls and telling them to get out of the way. But you know, he talked about how he was just concerned about his family, you know, and just trying to make sure that he was maintaining the livelihood. I mean, what he was doing was actually changing the game and changing America with his play, with his style of play. They had to lower the mound because he was so dominant. That type of thing from a black player is important, you know, and it was a, you know, sign of protest in many regards. But for a lot of these guys, they didn't have the same platform, and they really needed to, you know, do what Jackie did, which was play. Just get out there and play. And it took real courage, because Curt Flood, I mean, you know, we can make a whole movie about just Curt Flood. I mean, his whole livelihood, his career, everything just fell to pieces. I mean, and his health. You know, these guys sacrificed their health. I mean, Jackie died, he was only 53 years old. Curt died, I think he was in his 60s, either 1999 or 2000, I think it was, that he, you know, had passed away. But they sacrificed everything. And it's the type of story that I like. I mean, with the one and only Dick Gregory that you mentioned, it was a similar thing, where you have an unsung hero. You have somebody who was responsible for the lives that we have in America today, and you don't know it. And we need to give these folks their flowers and their appreciation.
Yeah, there's some interesting parallels there with Gregory, and then you have all the Godfrey Cambridges and Flips and Cos and Pryor and that followed, you know, George Kirby, Slappy White, that followed in his footsteps after he opened the door in the upscale venues and the larger clubs and the Playboy
Yeah, well,
Club.
they called him the Jakie Robinson of comedy. So it's like after Jakie Robinson did what he did, basically, if you were the first black of anything, you were the Jakie Robinson of that industry, that, you know, section, you know, whatever it is that sort of piece in history, and that was sort of the same thing here, but we actually get to see, like, okay, what were the guys that came after Jackie that sort of carried the torch? And the interesting thing about these monumental figures, like Jackie, like Dick Gregory, is that, you know, you can't be them. You really don't even need to try. What you can do is be a piece of them. And what Curt did and what Bill did and what Bob did, what Willie Mays, what so many of these other guys did was they were a piece of Jackie. And if they were there to lend themselves as a part of a whole, then change can happen. Things change as a result of that. Not everyone needs to be the one that carry everything on their shoulders. And Jackie paid the price for that, and so many of the guys that followed him did the same thing. Got a phone call coming in?
Must have gone back up.
But yeah, but that was one of the special things about making this film is, I mean, you know, hopefully we're doing a part 2 at some point because there's so many more guys. So many more guys that deserve to have that level of credit, but you know, we only got 2 hours, so we've got to be able to focus on a handful, and it was a lot of fun focusing on the Cardinals.
You know, a point you just raised, even though Mays wasn't outspoken, you know, in the movement and things like that, and maybe Aaron wasn't outspoken, not that they didn't say anything at all, but they weren't as visible and as prominent at rallies and things of that nature. They gave money. They spoke in columns and op-eds. They were quoted about it, even when they tried to move into homes that they were, you know, denied. You know, Mays tried to move into a home in Atherton, California, and people got in their feelings about that. And same thing that happened to Flood and Gibson when they tried to purchase property. But to your point, because baseball was the national pastime when those guys were in their heyday, like Frank Robinson and Mays and Aaron and Banks and Clemente, just as you stated, by them doing their jobs excellently, they did help people that were the first black postmaster or first black admin or first black foreman or forewoman or first black school principal in their district, because by baseball being a national pastime, and by the Mayses and Aarons and Bankses and Clementes being on a national stage, because baseball occupied much of a bigger media role in society than it does today, the example that they set psychologically when other black people went to apply for jobs that were not on that level of being a Major League Baseball player and not in the limelight, the excellence that they displayed helped psychologically sort of bring people into the mindset that black people can perform these cerebral functions, to Gibson's point about, you know, pitchers not understanding and blacks can't pitch, they can't play quarterback, they can't play middle linebacker, they can't play shortstop, they can't be a point guard because those are cerebral positions, and you have to be the person on the team that's making instant decisions in your head about strategy and things like that. People that had what we call day jobs or 9-to-5s not only could sense, you know, a great pride in what those people were doing, but the rest of the country and whites, it debunked arguments that blacks weren't fit to perform in other more everyday, for lack of a better term, roles.
Yeah, it debunked any inferiority argument. As a matter of fact, they knew that blacks weren't inferior. That's exactly why they kept them out of baseball. That's why they kept them out, right? They knew that we're going to be going up against superior athletes. And so, you know, we didn't get to take the deep dive of Cap Anson back in the late, and this is something I didn't know, which was that there were black ball players in the national leagues, in the major leagues before Jakie Robinson. This is 1884, Bud Fowler, Moses Fleetwood Walker. This was new to me in making this movie, but having this gentleman's agreement, I mean, that same gentleman's agreement was, you know, in the NFL, that same gentleman's agreement still exists to keep blacks out of management or ownership of teams. And, you know, when you're thinking like the 9 to 5, sport is one of the, like the tribalization of sport is one of the few things in this country that brings everybody together, that unites everyone, black, white, Republican, Democrat, whatever it is, rich, poor, that unites everyone together. And so outside of music, which is universal and global, sports are. And so these athletes and these celebrities being able to use that platform is monumental. And they were able to progress it in a way. I mean, again, Dr. King giving credit to Jakie Robinson, you know, for a lot of the blueprint for what he was doing in the civil rights movement, because Jakie had reached that level of prominence before Dr. King, national prominence before Dr. King. So it's an incredibly valuable tool. And so when we see Colin Kaepernick taking a knee, or we see LeBron James, you know, just wearing a T-shirt to make a statement, we're all listening because everybody is there, everyone's in the room, and that's what the unique thing was about Jakie Robinson, and that's what the unique thing was about everyone that followed him, is the platform that they were able to use, and it's great to be able to try to highlight that.
A couple other things. When Bill Russell died, as you know, Bill Russell and Curt Flood are both from Oakland, and you know, same era, you know, almost exact contemporaries. And the Panther Party first came to prominence in Oakland, and Flood and Russell are both great migration children who moved, you know, to Oakland when they were small from, or their parents did, from deep south, you know, from like Louisiana and places like that. And most of the great Oakland athletes were, of the 50s and 60s, were of course great migration children. And even the 70s with Joe Morgan, Frank Robinson, all those guys. They were born in Texas, Louisiana, and they moved, like Huey Newton. So do you think, I mean, obviously the movie is about more than one person, but do you think Flood and Russell, there's anything in the culture of Oakland that informed the people that Flood and Russell became in terms of their outspokenness?
Oh yeah, yeah, absolutely. I think that, you know, the culture of Oakland, you know, has given birth to so many revolutionaries. Obviously, the Black Panther Party. Who's here from Oakland? There we go. Yeah, there's a lot of people from Oakland apparently.
Deep in the house.
Deep in the house today. But yeah, you know, I think that the settings in which any of these figures in our history come out of informs the type of people that they become. Whether that's in, you know, from Detroit, whether that's Dick Gregory from St. Louis, whether that's out of Oakland with, you know, Curt Flood and Bill Russell and so many others, it informs and it shapes. I mean, even Jakie Robinson, who's out of Pasadena, it was because Jakie had experience dealing with white people that they were like, okay, this is the guy. I mean, he was a superior athlete, but even the ball players in the Negro Leagues realize, I mean, Hank Aaron had mentioned it, that he probably wasn't the best guy. There was a ton of guys who were superior to Jakie Robinson. And, you know, that's saying a lot because of how superior of an athlete he was in all these different sports. I mean, you know, baseball was like his third sport. You know, he didn't even want to play that. But because he had that experience surrounding him in a more progressive part of the country in Pasadena, still not progressive enough, but progressive enough to the point where Jakie had comfortability around white people, then it's like, okay, we can put this guy in there and he's not gonna just blow up.
Right, he'd been in the military,
He was disciplined.
And he played a contact sport, which is
Right.
Football, against almost all white guys in the Pac-8.
But he wanted to. You know, he wanted to, and by the time he left the game, he was, yeah, he let his inner black man out. He was pretty angry because of all of the built-up burden that he had to endure over the course of time. And you know, again, that had a physical effect on him, and ultimately ended up, you know, passing away quite young and looking much older than he was at the time that he actually passed away.
Yeah,
you
it's
know,
amazing.
that stress has a physical effect at the end of the day.
Yeah, that's amazing because Rachel is 100 and
Yeah, she was 100.
psychiatric nurse and
Yeah, right. Still, and very with it. It's not, you know, 100 and it's just
debilitated.
nice to see her. You know, she's cracking jokes. I had a picture of her cracking some joke, you know, with me when I was there. But that's what's amazing is, again, for me as a filmmaker, I find a personal mission of taking these people, places, things, these figures in history, and putting them in their right place. Similar to like a museum curator that might find an artifact that nobody's ever seen or heard of, or it may have heard of it but not seen it, and putting it, shining, you know, polishing it up and putting it on display in a museum for you to be able to see. And now we get to be able to tell these stories to our children and our family and our friends, and we get to learn something as a result of it. And that's a personal mission of mine as a storyteller.
well, you know, it's hats off for telling the story so well. It's not a game that's one of the most widely followed team sports or pro team sports. Now it's probably arguably maybe third to two other major North American pro team sports. The way that when you're approaching a subject like this, what do you think about how the game has changed, you know, and you know, toward the end of the doc, we talk about people not playing in our community for lack of opportunity, different reasons, not seeing people that look like them. Obviously, there's a lot of Afro-Latin, Afro-Caribbean players in the game today, big stars, and it's, you know, they're black. And they follow in Jackie's footsteps as well, the Minosos and the Clementes and the Marichals. But when you're putting together a narrative like this, what is it about? You talked about how you pick your subject matters and things like that. It's interesting that the Gregory story, this doc, you compared them to like putting exhibiting something.
Sort of artifacts in the right place. Yeah, I mean, there's a lot of parallels for sure between, you know, both of those films. But I think what you're getting at is sort of kind of, I think probably one of the last things I'll say here is how cyclical history is. And right now, the MLB, when we're talking about Black Americans, Native Black Americans, I mean, that percentage is about the same as when Jakie Robinson retired. That's about 7 or 8%. And they're working diligently to try to do everything that they can to bring ball players, to bring black kids and brown kids into the game. It's a very expensive sport, become very expensive. The barriers of entry are pretty prohibitive. But there's a lot of work the reason we wanted to circle back to that is that there's a lot of work that still needs to be done. That was ultimately the idea, is that we've come quite far, but there's still a substantial amount of work that needs to be done. And so that's sort of the mission and I think the message of the story, you know, at the end of the day.
And lastly, how do you feel now about being someone that was able to include Mr. Aaron and Mr. Gibson since, you know, obviously in 2020
right.
they were...
I feel proud of it. You know, I mean, I think that these were two of the last interviews that they did. Bob Gibson's interview, I mean, he passed away in 2020. This was predated me joining this project as the director, but and the same thing with, you know, with Hank Aaron. And I think that being able to showcase them just a little bit, and again, for people to be able to know about Bob Gibson. You know, a lot of people, this is a name that a lot of people have not heard of if you're not a baseball fan. But what it is that he did to change the game and how influential he is to all of the different players today is substantial. And he needs to be honored, you know, for that. And Bill White and Curt Flood, and we got to get Bill White in the Hall of Fame. You know, he's still with us.
And arguably, people have even made the case Flood should be enshrined.
Yeah, that's right. Right. He's still with us, lives in Pennsylvania. It was a very valuable asset to this story even coming to fruition. But it's time to really be able to, you know, to do that. So.
Well, I know you've had a tour with Miami and
this is the last stop on the tour. So thank you everyone for coming out. Really appreciate it. Always love the vineyard and the crowd here, and it's always great. I have my wife and son here, or one of my sons here. My 3-year-old was never going to be able to sit through this movie. But thank you all for coming.
Thanks again, everyone. Glad you joined.